So welcome to today's Friday CoffeeCast. And with this being the end of the first week of July, so the first week of our third quarter of the year and the first week of the second half of the year, it is a perfect opportunity as we head into a weekend to invite you to take stock. And to also do the things I just outlined there, to pause, to realign, recommit, recharge, and go. And I'm going to explain what I mean by each of those. And the inciting incident or story for this is that my ex-partner is a real ninja at being productive and getting things done. It's a real gift and part of her nature that she's both learned and perhaps come in with as a soul. And as part of some of the exchanges in our separation, she said the following. She said, "I sometimes wonder what you do in a day." And as someone who has always had a kind of pathological self-loathing and feeling like I'd never do enough, I allowed that barb, or those words, perhaps they weren't intended as a barb, but I allowed them to go in. And that barb stuck beneath the skin of my soul for a day or so, letting its poison drip out. And this is, me, of course, I allowed this to occur. I accept that. And to the point where yesterday, even as I was dealing with a huge amount of emotions as part of the separation and allowing those to move through, I found myself utterly kind of paralyzed and overwhelmed, just looking at the list of things I had to do. And as you'll see if you read the newsletter for today, I was also paralyzed because I was allowing myself or trying to live according to her standards. And rather than being aligned, hence my invitation to realign, rather than being aligned to my true essence, my true power. And over the course of the evening, allowing myself to recognize just how much I was trying to live according to her standards, which, of course, let me just say how nuts that is. I'm trying to live my life according to the standards of an ex-partner. Like, who does that, right? That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be inspired by the examples we see around us, but ultimately, to truly claim our power, to truly be in our power, I have to accept where I am right now, what I am capable of right now. And in doing that, in allowing myself to let go of all the stories and standards I was holding that perhaps were other people's, were members of my family, were from members of my family, members of the social media glitterati, the Alex Hormozis, the Stephen Bartletts of this world, the Gary V's, all of these people who folk like me tend to be inspired by, but also perhaps maybe take on and assume that their ways of being have to be my ways of being. And in this process of taking stock, the first was to take stock of where was I at in terms of my own inner integrity and alignment, my own coherence, to recognize the extent to which I was allowing the stories of an ex-partner, the perhaps judgments of an ex-partner, to cloud my capacity to be in my full power. And to let go of all of that. So that was the first stage of taking stock. And then to go, okay, well, what does need doing? Where am I at? What are the mission critical pieces? And a key part of this was allowing myself to stop, to pause, to slow down, to step off the frantic treadmill of doing, and just go for a moment and say, okay, letting go of all the stories and all the standards that aren't my own, and recognizing all that needs to happen. What can I do today? What needs doing today? And where do those two things match up? What can I do today? What needs doing today? And from those two lists, what matches up? And it may be a challenge to think of the entire next 6 months of the year. But my invitation is to consider that it could be a really valuable, a really vital exercise to look at what you've achieved in the last 6 months. Because part of this whole taking stock process was for me to recognize that even if my ex-partner might have been able to do more, like I had to recognize that I, myself, and celebrate that I, myself, in the last 3 months had created more than 50,000 words of articles and podcasts. That's the equivalent of a 200-page book. And in the process of doing that, I've taken our business from unlisted to number 1 or number 2 on Google, depending on which browser you use. I'd also created a 6,000-page business plan, handed that in and got a distinction in my master's. I'd also managed to navigate the previous ending of the same relationship and the reignition of that same relationship and all the emotional elements that go with that. And I'd also managed to refurbish my house and take more than £2,500 worth of bookings in the space of a week. And by many people's standards, that would be enough, whilst also having 2 small children. And that taking stock process, I realized initially I was doing it to try and be like, for my ex-partner to be like, look at all these things I did. And I realized, no, that's not for her. That's for me. That's for me to recognize that even in my own flow, even when there are days where I am less productive than I would like to be, still over time, when I take stock, when I pause, when I realign, when I allow myself to recharge and see where I've been, where I've come from, that there is cause for celebration. That the self-loathing and the beating myself up doesn't need to be there. And therefore I get to look forward to the next half of the year, acknowledging that I am most powerful when I am aligned with who I can truly be. And when I take stock of what I am truly capable of. And then from that place, look at what really needs doing. And go. So, thank you so much for continuing to listen to these CoffeeCasts. It means the absolute world. And you may have heard over the last week or so a real ramping up of the sense of purpose and mission behind what we're doing with Greater Life because of some of the things I've been discovering about the real rates of inflation and what particularly the over 50s are going to be facing financially if they have not got pensions and savings in place privately. So this really matters. The over 50s are a growing demographic, and there are going to be hundreds of thousands who are going to be forced to build businesses as a way to stay alive. And if you are listening to this and you are someone who has already worked out successfully how to run businesses, how to manage finances, in fact, how to really be proficient at anything, my invitation is to come and be of service in Greater Life, to share your skills and knowledge so that we can uplift an entire generation, an entire demographic, and in so doing, I believe, create an incredible legacy for planet Earth, for our children and our grandchildren. And it all starts this weekend, perhaps, with taking stock of where you're at, where you've been, who you truly are, and where you want to go.